Hello and welcome to the Grove. So with Convergence coming out May 23rd, 2023, we got a nice little cinematic official story trailer. Now for just 2 minutes of cinematic, there is actually a lot here. And so if you have not seen the cinematic yet, I recommend watching that first. I've already watched it dozens of times and we are going to be stopping and starting pretty much the whole way through. This is not the best way to watch this cinematic for the first time. There's a link to the original cinematic in the description. So if you've not seen it, I suggest you go watch the cinematic, then come back here and we could talk about it.
I'm not here to hurt you. I'm you. From the future.
So the first thing we see is Ekko, and he puts emphasis on this thing that's around his neck. You can tell he's pointing to it right at the beginning. It's right like holding his collar together, right? It's some disc with a blue ring inside of it. There's gonna be more on that later. And then it pans up to the face and the person pulls back their hood and ends up being Ekko, but it's Ekko from the future. And note the eye here. Not sure if Ekko lost his eye somehow and had to get a replacement eye augmentation, or if it was something intentional to offer him some kind of advantage. I would assume that if in a fight Ekko lost his eye, he would just rewind time and try again, right? So interested to see if this is explained in game. And even the hand that he uses to pull his cloak back is robotic. Now we do have characters in the present timeline with the younger Ekko like Victor, whose body is almost completely augmented by steel and science, as well as Camille, whose pursuit of superiority through hex tech body augmentation has left many to wonder if she's even more machine than human. So perhaps this future version of Ekko also ventured down the path of hex tech body augmentation by choice rather than a necessity.
From the future. I'm here to investigate something in the past.
So Zahn is in trouble right now?
If you would just listen, we'll be keeping the city safe from a devastating future.
Now we are told by future Ekko that he's here to investigate some past event. And I love this image showing what looks like both of them working together to view or alter time. And they are standing on these cogs, and under them we see what looks like Zahn come into perspective from below. Then it transitions pretty quickly. We're moving up a building, which is exploding from the bottom up. And then finally Ekko comes into view and we see this lightning flash, like a yellow lightning, and more on that later as well. And then the top of the building also explodes. And so we're gonna come back to this exploding building later. We're gonna reference it again because it's pretty important.
I'm here to investigate something in the past.
So Zahn is in trouble right now?
And so future Ekko finishes this scene off by saying, we're going to protect this city from a devastating future. So something bad happens in the future. We don't know what. Future Ekko is clearly aware of it. He's coming back in the past to prevent it.
Well, if it isn't the boy who shattered time.
There is a war coming.
And then right after that, we meet who I am assuming is the villain of this game. And the first appearance we see of him is a reflection through some yellow crystalline-like material. And then we flash to a factory where it looks like this yellow crystal material is being made. And his first line to Ekko is, if it isn't the boy who shattered time. And he says it almost in a way of, like he might be the villain, but the only reason he is the villain is because Ekko broke the timeline. He's also, really heavily augmented by a machine. So, I mean, given that this is a Zahn-focused game, I'm not surprised that we see a lot of these like machine augmentations for people. We don't really get too much as to why he's the villain, other than it seems to have something to do with this yellow crystal structure. And he's clearly making it in his factory is what I think. If I had to like stretch guess, I would think that Ekko shattered time, which allowed him to make this yellow crystal structure somehow, or gain access to this yellow crystal structure, and it allows him to do something with time. But that's like a complete guess. Like we don't really know that from the cinematic alone. Would be interesting if I'm right though. Called it here first. So we're still not sure what this yellow crystal is, but it's clearly very important. He's not handing it to present day Ekko here. He takes it, right? He's like almost between them, and then he takes it to himself. And there's so much emphasis on this gold crystal. We're only 30 seconds in the cinematic, and we've already talked about it probably the most of anything. And then we finish with like a nice little fist bump between the two Ekkos while future Ekko says, there is a war coming.
Well, if it isn't the boy who shattered time.
There is a war coming.
I don't know what happens in the future, but it's not up to you to fix the world all by yourself.
Now look at this next scene. This is, I think, really important. There's a different building here exploding from the first one, which exploded. But the explosion is very similar. Both have this lightning flash right before, followed by an explosion. Now I believe this is in the future. If we look at the first building, there is a green smog, which we can associate pretty easily with Zaun of today. And the buildings look brown and rusted. And even the yellow tinged windows almost look like algae has grown over them and the light is shining through from the inside. This is all, Zaun of present day. And one thing I didn't mention when we were looking at that first tower exploding are these cultivars, which are large isolated greenhouses, specially designed to grow trees and plants in Zaun. Tends to be like for the wealthy of Zaun and a source of clean air for them. So it's a nice little touch here from what we know as present day Zaun. Any kind of time you see Zaun, you get either like that green or yellow glow from the windows. We see it in Arcane, we see it in game, we see it in photos. So that is present day Zaun. But this next building does not have that green Zaun smog we know. Now you may think Piltover, but the piping all over the place definitely makes me think Zaun and not Piltover. So perhaps in future Zaun, instead of the smog being green, it's more red. And the buildings have purple color to them rather than the rust color we usually see in present day Zaun. And then even during this scene, we have present day Ekko saying, I don't know what happens in the future, which even more emphasizes that this is what we're seeing is future Zaun. One other piece here, if I had to guess, I would assume that these two buildings are actually the same building, one in the past and one in the future. I'm saying this because both of them have similar height and structure to them. What building it is, I'm not 100% sure. For a while, I was thinking maybe it's Old Hungary, like an icon. Old Hungary is an iconic mechanized clock tower in Old Zaun, exposed grinding gears and stuff. I'm not really sure. Like the base of it goes to the heart of Zaun, but I don't think this one's high enough to be Old Hungary. Like there's other buildings taller than it, both in present day Zaun and in future Zaun. Then I was thinking maybe it's Kembaron Tower, because that's pretty high structure, kind of towers over everything, a little bit higher, because it's definitely higher than a lot of the buildings around it, but there are buildings taller than it in both shots. So I don't know. Maybe Old Hungary, maybe Kembaron Tower. Like it doesn't look like the Kembaron Tower from Arcane, but we don't really get too many views of that. So it could be. It's definitely a building of significance, and I think that they're the same building just judging by the structures of them. Now, after the explosion, we see a symbol in the middle with a bunch of explosions around it. What looks like there's like a darker gray part of the image, which is Zaun. And then the lighter gray part is Piltover. And we could see the bridges of Piltover spanning above Zaun. And there's explosions going on both in Piltover and Zaun. So these incidents aren't just isolated to Zaun. They're happening in Piltover and Zaun. And keep that symbol in mind in the middle. We're going to come back to it. And so we get some cool action scenes. And also note here how you see like those balloons flying over Piltover. That's going to be important a bit later as well. I'm going to come back to it. But then we come to Camille. And I think this is actually future Camille, and I'll explain that. But a little bit about her. She is weaponized to operate outside the boundaries of the law, an elegant and elite agent who ensures the Piltover machine and its Zaunite underbelly runs smoothly. And she is highly modified by Hextech, as I explained earlier. So emphasis on that she operates outside the boundaries of the law. And she states that Ekko is coming back over and over to the past to try and fix something in the timeline. So I'm assuming based on what we know so far that Ekko is trying to stop some war that's coming in the future. And given that Camille operates outside the boundaries of the law, and she seems to know that Ekko is coming back over and over to the past, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, right? When someone's manipulating time, most people aren't aware that time has been manipulated, but Camille is. So I think maybe this time technology is a bit more available in the future. I think Camille has access to it, and she's following Ekko into the past to understand or help him stop the war.
He's been coming back to the past over and over again, trying to fix something in our timeline.
We've all got him, Ekko. The first fight you have to beat is with yourself.
And so this scene, really look at, there's three people. It looks like maybe they're his friends or his buddies that work with him, but then one trips and then this blue disc flies at us, right? And then look what Ekko makes. Ekko makes this blue disc. He puts it into like this little circle machine, right? And it looks very similar to the one that future Ekko emphasized at the beginning. And so I think these are like almost like time bombs that you can throw around and manipulate, and more, you'll see a little bit of that in the future. But that's how I think all this ties together. Like these blue discs are pretty important. So we have yellow crystals and we got blue discs, both important. Yeah, and even Ekko looks at it and then it flashes and it looks like this is him in future Zaun. And so more emphasis on those blue discs being mini time manipulation devices.
The first fight you have to beat is with yourself.
This isn't over. Not yet.
And then, man, this jump transition is so cool. Like we see Ekko jump off the ledge in future Zaun, but but then it looks like it transitions to present day Piltover. Because remember that first image that we saw from Camille saying that he keeps coming back to the past, and we saw that Piltover, those balloons flying over Piltover? I think that scene is more tied to here, with Ekko jumping around and we could see the balloons in the background. So this is above Piltover. These are a common thing for Piltover, these air balloons. And he's actually looks like jumping from another balloon, which looks to have just exploded behind him. But if we look at him landing here, right by his right foot, we see a logo. And this is Jinx's logo, almost like her calling card. And we're gonna see Jinx in a bit. Now we see some gameplay. Huge fan of the grinding, the bouncing. I'm a big platformer fan, so I'm really excited for this. But we also see this section, which is, judging by the background and piping, it's still very much Zaun. But if we know anything about Zaun, there are really not very many trees. But we do know one place with trees that Ekko visits frequently and is featured in Arcane as well. It is a place where Ekko found a single tree and built a community around it for orphans and those who need a place to heal and start again. And I really like Ekko's line from the show. He says, "If a single seed could make it down here, so could we." And that's where I think this is. Like, I think this is in Zaun, but it's around that tree. And that's why you see the piping, but you still see that tree in the background.
I'm trying to save both of our cities from a disastrous fate.
And after some gameplay, we hear future Ekko state that he is trying to save both of their cities from a disastrous fate. So I think that this is still the same timeline, right? We're not dealing with like separate timelines or anything. Ekko, future Ekko, changing stuff in the past does affect his future. It's not like he's changing stuff in the past to save this one timeline. We're still dealing with one timeline. And following right after that, we got her calling card earlier. Jinx comes into the picture. And we could tell it's Jinx just from the silhouette, the laugh, and the literal rocket launcher which fires at Ekko. Now look in Ekko's hand here. Before the rocket hits, we can see some of that gold crystal which he is holding. Then the rocket hits, and I love this smile here. It's a nice touch to Jinx's rocket explosion. But if we look back at Ekko, we can see that he lost his grip on that crystal, so keep that in mind. Now right there, we just saw a separate shot of Ekko looking at a yellow crystal in the air and using time to get to it. I think these scenes are kind of the same, right? They're just spread out a little bit in the video.
You're mine!
Now, do you remember that symbol with all the explosions going off earlier? Well, look here. We hear the villain's voice come in again. And look at the machine he is controlling. The symbol on the front looks very similar to that original symbol. I think the symbol is meant to be kind of his face with the mustache. I get a real Eggman vibe from this, which I really dig, honestly.
You're mine!
Now at the end, we see Camille again, but look how awesome this scene is. We see Warwick literally leap out from a green toxic smog explosion at Ekko. And a bit of backstory on Warwick. Warwick is a monster who haunts the gray alleys of Zaun, transformed by agonizing experiments. His body is fused with an intricate system of chambers and pumps, machinery filling his veins with alchemical rage. Bursting out of the shadows, he preys upon those criminals who terrorize the city's depths. Warwick is drawn to blood and driven mad by its scent. None who spill it can escape him. But man, look at the smoke here and the toxic green falling off of him. The art in this game looks so good. And then we close out with Ekko throwing some disc. Remember that disc that he was making before with the blue in the middle? And like I said, that's where I get the throwing from. I think it's something like a time bomb that his friends helped them make. They were able to throw in game. So there it is, May 23rd, 2023. I really can't wait for this game. I'm a huge fan of platformers, but I've also, I really liked Rune King. I really liked Mage Seeker. I think everything that they're doing with Riot Forge is awesome. I have a theory that they're kind of picking at each zone, right? They're doing this one for Zaun. They did one which Rune King that covered Bilgewater as well as the Shadow Isles. Mage Seeker really goes into Demacia. We have Song of Nunu, which is Freljord. Hextech Mayhem, which I guess you could kind of say Piltover. I feel like Convergence is really Piltover and Zaun. There's not that much to Hextech Mayhem lore-wise. But I feel like they're using these games to build out the MMO, like get players familiar with each of the zones before the MMO comes out. Like this one came out and it covers Piltover and Zon. I think the next game that they announce is going to be, well, obviously the next one's Song of Nunu, which is Freljord. But following that, we're going to see maybe Noxus game or like a game based on Ionia or Targon. I think that's what they're trying to do, is like one game for every zone. Maybe we'll do a separate video on that. But man, May 23rd, 2023, I am excited. Anyways, that's it for the cinematic deep dive. I hope you're as excited for Convergence as I am. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join the grove for more Runeterra lore content. Thanks, and I will see you in the next one.
I'm trying to save both of our cities from a disastrous fate.